Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we'll have the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are seeing those westerly winds returning at the moment, sweeping away all of that cold air we saw through the weekend, finally bringing something a bit milder for the Christmas period. And hopefully as we head into Christmas Eve we are likely to see higher pressure building in for all, and that means although we've got a bit of rain around at the moment, it will be turning much drier for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and probably Boxing Day as well. Beyond that though, as we'll see from some of the longer range charts, it does look like it will turn more unsettled and colder as we do end December, and especially as we start 2025. There's quite a high chance now we see something colder. Just how cold will it be? It is still very much up for dispute. A lot of runs are showing at least the airflow coming in somewhere from a northerly direction. Of course, how quickly does that air move in the exact wind direction, dew points, all of these things come into to sort of decide how cold will it be and whether we'll see any wintriness associated with that. But once again today we've got a whole array of different longer range charts, but there is definitely increasing confidence that it will be colder. Just as I said, how cold and understand how sustained will it be. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see the westerly winds are moving back in at the moment. And that is why we've got this very patchy light to moderate rain slowly sweeping eastwards at the moment. Bit of wintriness with it earlier this morning, but it's now all turning back to rain. And as I said, it isn't too horrible, but it is pretty gloomy, lots of thick cloud, and as I said, on and off rain. As I said, the positive though is it is turning milder, still chilly in the east. You can see still lighter blues in places, calling this around lunchtime, so it is pretty cold still in places. But in the west, across Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, you can see what is coming for all in the coming hours, with much milder air moving in, getting up towards the double digits through Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. The upper air temperatures are actually looking exceptionally mild for a time, especially during Christmas Day, which does, very counterintuitive compared to what we kind of expect and what we associate with Christmas, with snow and all that stuff, even though that's not particularly realistic for the UK at least. Very interesting seeing the mildest air mass we've seen in a couple of months is probably arriving on Christmas Day. Because under higher pressure though, there is a slight inversion taking place, so we're not actually going to see it be as mild at the surface. But yeah, upper air temperatures look pretty incredible in the next couple of days. Now, do look at the latest UKV. You can see all of that rain slowly sweeping eastwards at the moment. A bit of wintriness this morning, as I said, across the higher ground of northern England and Scotland. But that rain slowly creeping through. And then as we head into Christmas Eve, you can see it does dry up for most, especially further southwards. A bit of lingering rain in the north, but much drier for all. But still lots of thick cloud, unfortunately, so still might be a little bit miserable in quite a few areas. As we move through towards Christmas Day, you can see it is a pretty dry morning, a bit of rain for the far north of Scotland here. We've got this weather front that's trying to move in, but the high pressure is halting its progress. So if you are across the far northern Isles of Scotland, then unfortunately it does look like it will rain for probably most of the day. But elsewhere, it is very dry, but we start to see a bit of sunshine breaking through. Not massive amounts. I don't suspect we'll see much blue skies, but a bit of sunshine, which will just add to the general light levels, which hopefully will be a bit better than it is at the moment, where it is still, as I said, very, very gloomy. So hopefully less gloomy there for Christmas Day, but can't give any guarantees. Of course, cloud amounts and where the sun breaks through is very difficult to forecast. All we can say though is there is a fairly good chance we'll see some breaks at times on Wednesday. Beyond that, into Boxing Day, it's still fairly dry, and by the afternoon we still have this weather front to the north slowly creeping in, so it is turning a bit more unsettled across Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then eventually, as we head into the 27th, we start to see a bit more widespread showery rain, as we do slowly see that higher pressure losing its strength, and that could become more apparent towards the weekend and towards the last couple of days of 2024, as we do start to see lower pressure arriving from the north. How quickly it moves in though will all decide how cold it will get. As I said, lots of varying opinions from the runs at the moment, but it is interesting nonetheless, and we'll have a look at that in a moment's time. If you just finish on the UKV by looking at the upper air temperatures, And the surface temperatures, you can see the upper air temperatures at the moment look very cold air getting swept away, much milder air arriving through in towards Christmas Eve, but it's really onto Christmas Day where, look at this, we see this exceptionally mild air mass through the morning, 13 degrees at 850 HP, maybe even 14. That is very mild, almost 15 degrees above average for the time of year. We're not going to quite see those sort of temperatures at the surface. It's going to be a bit colder. There is a slight inversion taking place, but nonetheless it is still exceptionally mild air mass, and probably will add to the gloominess. It's bringing a lot of moisture, and it does, as I said, add to all of that trapped cloud. As we progress though, later in the week we do start to see cold air slowly returning, and it could make much more of an appearance into early next week. As I said, it's the last couple of days of the year, and it could turn pretty potent into early 2025, but at the moment still, as I said, lots of uncertainty. And then just to finish up, if we look at the surface temperatures, you can see this afternoon temperatures around 5 or 6 degrees, pretty cold and yeah, pretty miserable out there. But it will be getting better as we head into Christmas Eve. You can see for the afternoon of Christmas Eve, 12 to 13 degrees for most. So actually pretty mild for the time of year, actually very mild, almost 5 degrees above average. And into Christmas Day, it's similar conditions, maybe more towards kind of 9 to 11. Even though those upper air temperatures start to rise, we start seeing a little bit more of an inversion taking place. Not the sort of inversion that gives frost and fog like we can see, but a sort of inversion that does reduce those temperatures at the surface compared to what we would expect to see just having looked at those upper air temperatures. And then finally into the last couple of days of this run, 7 to 10 degrees on Boxing Day, and into the 27th, again, kind of 7 to 10 degrees. And as I said, it's slowly cooling down into the weekend and for the final few days of 2024. Now, if you look at the latest GFS, which has produced some very interesting runs over the past few days, you've seen lots of cold, very cold runs appearing. But the thing is, we're not seeing massive consistency in the exact way that we get to that colder pattern. We are seeing that high pressure building up towards northeast Canada, trying to extend towards Greenland. We're seeing that fairly consistently around 7 days' time. But after that, the evolution of the low pressure, high pressure is very, very ropey. We're not seeing a lot of consistency at all. GFS generally gets to something a bit colder, but we're just hoping to see a bit of consistency, exactly how it gets there. Yesterday, we even saw Scandinavian high starting to build it. So yeah, we'll see what it's showing today. You can see high pressure building over the next couple of days, a classic, pretty mild high pressure pattern during the Christmas period. However, towards the end of the month, you can see the high pressure builds towards northeast Canada, blocking that flat westerly jet stream, and lower pressure starts to exit out of Iceland towards Scandinavia around the 31st of December, so New Year's Eve, and starts pushing northwesterly or northerly winds. Now, exactly the evolution of these low pressure systems will decide how cold it gets. If it's more of a succinct, direct northerly flow, then it would get very cold very quickly. Here it's a bit more muddled. Those isobars are not as tightly packed together. They're not all direct northerly flow. There's a lot of wiggling going on here as we see little low pressure systems develop within the flow. This would exacerbate precipitation, but it would also mean it would be milder because we're not seeing that very cold air getting drawn out of the Arctic. Now, the reason for this is because these lows are not able to move eastwards and southwards like they generally want to. And that's because we've got this European high. Now, it's nowhere near as strong as we've seen from some runs over the past few days, so perhaps there's a signal that it's weakening in the latest runs, but it still halts the progression of these lows, and it eventually clears eastwards. You can see this by the first few days of January. It clears eastwards and opens the door to northerly winds, so it does turn cold eventually, but it takes 3 or 4 days longer than it initially would like to, and that means eventually that high pressure slowly breaks down, which inevitably happens. The high pressure system can't sit exactly where it is for too long. You know, we get anomalous situations sometimes, but generally we don't see high pressure hang around in the exact same location for more than a few days, and you can see the high pressure eventually starts to migrate back into the Atlantic. And although yes, it's cold and northerly winds towards the end of the run, eventually the high pressure topples and builds back over us. So it's on the cusp of something very cold, but just because these lows can't clear eastwards, it means all of this very cold air to our north doesn't plunge southwards like we would expect to see, having just looked in this frame in isolation. If we do watch the evolution of those upper air temperatures, you can see we do see cold air mixing in, but it doesn't dominate, eventually pulls completely in towards the first few days of January, and it does go cold, very cold, a bit of snow around, very frosty, icy, but just not quite as cold and wintry as it could have been if we saw more of a direct northerly wind. So again, these sort of very small factors are still causing headaches, and it's all due to these small low pressure systems developing within the flow. If these didn't, and we did see more of a direct northerly, then at this stage, the final couple of days of December, we would potentially be plunged into the freezer and would go very cold, as we have got very cold air mass just to our north. So it is one to keep a very close eye on. But once again, another day, another cold GFS run. Maybe not quite as cold as we've seen in the last couple of days, but it gets cold, snow-worthy air in for at least a few days towards the end of December and start of January. Yes, still very much up to debate exactly how this does evolve. Now, if you compare to the GM, which has been a bit more pessimistic over the past few days, that's kind of a sort of a trend I've seen over the past few months with the GEM. It's slightly more pessimistic, not always jumping on the bandwagon, being a bit more moderate. So it'll be interesting to see what it shows today. High pressure building in over the next couple of days, especially for the Christmas period. Eventually, as we head towards the last couple of days of the month, look at this, the European high actually builds in, and instead of developing anything cold with northerly winds, it actually pushes higher pressure in, and that means we go pretty mild but probably very dry. And there's a risk, if we saw the right air mass develop at the surface, right pattern, that we could even see an inversion. It doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, but the risk is there. And then right towards the end of the run, European high eventually moves away, and we go into a bit of a colder northwesterly flow. So GM completely anti anything cold at all, which is very interesting. It does go against what we're seeing from the majority of runs, and the biggest thing that almost tells me that this GM run is anomalous is the fact that at 30th of December, as we'll look at the ensembles at the end of the video, the majority of ensembles start to spike in precipitation. Lots more precipitation arriving after lots of high pressure over the Christmas period. So it gives me the indication that the GM has got this completely wrong. Majority of ensemble runs are getting lots of precipitation going towards the end of the month and start of 2025, which is completely anti what we're seeing here. This is higher pressure, bone dry conditions. If we put on the precipitation, we'd expect to see very little precipitation at all, which is complete opposite to what the majority of ensemble runs are showing. So again, this just suggests that I think this GM run is a little bit anomalous today. Hopefully it's not the GM catching on to something and means all the other runs we've looked at are completely wrong. I highly doubt that, but just means that the sort of other scenarios are still out there, but I would say this has got a very low chance of occurring just from the state of the ensembles over the past few days and even today, where we are seeing a fairly strong signal for precipitation to increase, which implies lower pressure is in place, not a big wedge of high pressure building up from Europe like we're seeing here. Now, to compare finally to the ECMWF, again, broadly very similar. If I do just refresh it quickly, you can see that we got that high pressure building in over the Christmas period. Eventually, towards the last couple of days of the year, that high pressure is much further southwards, so completely opposite to the GM, which has it building in. And we do see a stronger northerly wind. That is very interesting here. Those lower pressure systems are not developing within the flow, and the low pressure is able to build eastwards because the European high, or at least the high pressure towards Eastern Europe, is nowhere near as strong. It means low pressure can replace it, pulling eastwards and opening the floodgates to northerly winds. And towards day 10, we are pretty cold and potentially pretty wintry, with smaller low pressure systems developing within the flow. You can see here we have been flooded by very cold air, and it is very, very chilly. The northern hemispheric pattern, though, is very muddled. We've got a bit of a blocking high, but it's not completely blocking the jet stream, so we're seeing these small low pressure systems trying to break through. So it's a little bit of a jumbled North Atlantic pattern, but nonetheless, at day 10, you can see we're all in very cold air. If we do move into the surface, you can see down to -7, -8, maybe even -10 across Scotland, and you see the surface temperatures are well below freezing, and even by day 1 or 2 degrees. So yeah, ECMWF, the coldest run today. Not a sort of traditional colder pattern in terms of not having this massive direct northerly or easterly. It is a cold northerly flow for a time, but does get cut off quite quickly. It's just the fact that there's a lot of cold air around to our north. It means that it does go cold very quickly. So not a traditional sort of colder spell that we would see here from the ECMWF, but nonetheless, it gets there. We do see colder air moving in. We see those temperatures getting well below freezing. We see the dew points getting down towards freezing, and we would likely see quite a lot of wintriness and snow potential with this. So yeah, very interesting from the ECMWF today. GM looks like it's completely anomalous, I'm not going to lie, but both GFS and ECMWF get to this pattern here in day 7. The GFS develops loads of low pressure systems, not allowing this to clear, or especially the higher pressure tools. The ECS is nowhere, is a lot stronger, which means this low pressure is not allowed to clear, whereas ECMWF, it does clear, and we do open the floodgates to those northerly winds. If we were to kind of make this even colder, we'd ideally see this high pressure slightly further northwards and eastwards, just preventing the jet stream from completely breaking through, which is attempting to do here with these lows. If we do put up the 300 HPA streamlines, you can see the jet streams trying to break through, but this block here is preventing it, meaning we've got one bit going to the north, one bit going to the south, and whether this southerly stint winds or this northerly stint winds will all depend on how strong the blocking pattern is. If we hold this block off, this bit goes straight through the Mediterranean, then it would go very stormy and unsettled for the Mediterranean, very cold for us. But if this area of the jet stream doesn't win out, and we do see that flow coming up from the south once again, then we probably would see a snowy breakdown, but it would go a bit milder. So a classic split in the jet stream here, and yeah, a very cold pattern from the ECMWF. Now to finish by looking at the latest ensembles, you can see it's going very mild at the moment, exceptionally mild for Christmas Day, and then it slowly drops off towards the weekend. And then you can see as we end December and start January, you can see that big spike in precipitation, complete opposite to what the GEM was showing, which was it turning very dry and high pressure dominated, and you can see lots of spread, but a slow decreasing trend with a significant number of cold or very cold runs there from around the 1st or 2nd of January through the first week. So not expecting anything major in December, but it's as soon as we kind of flip into 2025, we're seeing a lot of colder runs appearing. They're not overwhelming, as we are still seeing milder runs. The ensemble mean is not too far below average. It's below average probably by a degree or two. Remember, we have to extrapolate because it is resetting into next year. But nonetheless, very interesting. Lots of things to watch out for over the coming days. And if we do just have a look at those 2 meter temperatures, you can see a slow drop off, and then you can see this bit of muddled pattern for early January. We've got lots of spread. The average is kind of around 6 or 7 degrees, but you can see some are in double digits, others down towards freezing. And if we finish by looking at the latest ECMWF ensembles, it's broadly very similar. Very mild over the next couple of days, dropping back towards average for the last few days of the month, and then slowly dropping to a couple of degrees below average. But again, lots of spread, lots of very cold runs, other milder runs as well. So we can't say exactly what we're going to see into 2025, but all options are on the card, and we're definitely seeing quite a few colder runs from the operational models. At the moment, ECMWF kind of the pick of the bunch for colder weather today, whereas the GFS had been the pick of the bunch over the last couple of days, which does give confidence. The models are seeing a colder pattern developing, but exactly how it develops and how severe it will be, or whether it's just kind of something a little bit minor, a little bit chilly, we'll have to wait and see. But again, real intrigue now for the start of 2025. Something is as afoot. Definitely doesn't look like we're going to see a classic westerly flow at all. Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how it does develop. I did say in yesterday's video, I think throughout this week, typically the Christmas week, I think we'll see the pattern really evolve, and we'll have a very good idea by the end of the week what we're going to be looking at for the first week of January. So it is going to be one to keep a very close eye on, and I'll keep you updated for the rest of the week. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.